Good evening, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight for a fantastic webinar. Really excited to be joined by Trevor and Angie Spencer from the Marathon Training Academy podcast. I'm your host, Varun Sriram, and both by my shirt that I'm wearing, UCAN 26.2, and by our guests, probably not so surprised that our topic today is marathon training, and more specifically, marathon nutrition and marathon fueling. But before we get into all of that, I want to say a big hello to our guests, Trevor and Angie. Hey guys, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having us on.
Really,
Yeah, totally great to be on the webinar with you guys. Varn, I think you forgot to shave today.
I did, Trevor. We're coming off a long winter in New York City, and I had to keep the bushy mountain man look for a few more days to keep me warm. But I think it's, slowly getting into spring, getting into running season. So this beard, by the time you see me in Boston this weekend, this beard will be long gone.
You wear it well.
So thank you, Angie. I appreciate that. So guys, let's start a little bit by talking about your guys' kind of expertise and background in this whole subject of marathon training. And Angie, we'll start with you. When did you take to running and more specifically marathoning, and what was the motivation for you to start training for that first marathon?
That's a great question. I started running back when I was about 16 years old, so approximately 20 years ago now. And like many teenage girls, it was mainly to lose weight. But, it was kind of funny. I found that running made me feel better about myself, and I just felt happier overall. So I ran for several years pretty casually, didn't really do any races, didn't really see any need to take it to the next level. But we moved cross country in 2007. And at that point, I had two little kids at home. I was just kind of feeling a little bit depressed and disillusioned with life, maybe, and decided I needed a big goal. And I had entered a couple of 5Ks that fall and really kind of got hooked by the racing bug. They say 5Ks are the gateway drug to running, and it was true for me. And I just decided I need to train for a marathon. I didn't know anyone who ran marathons. I didn't have any friends who were runners, but it was just kind of that big goal that I set for myself. And that point in time, I started training for my first marathon. I did everything wrong, I think. And in 2008, I ran my first marathon, and I crossed the finish line. Even though I was in pain, I knew I would do it again, and kind of the rest is history, so to speak.
Trevor, how about you? How'd you get bit by the running bug? Angie, that's funny. The gateway, as you call the 5Ks. I think I've heard that story from so many runners, and it's amazing how that kind of spawns into more races. But how about you, Trevor?
I think Angie's my gateway drug. We ran together a little bit while we were dating, and maybe like a mile at a time. And I remember feeling like I was going to die, pretty much. I've always been an active person. I like team sports, but never had a taste for running. So I started out with sort of a run-walk program that Angie made me probably back in, I don't know, 2009. And it was difficult, but yeah, it just kind of grows on you. And when you get out there and you start reaching those new milestones, and you get to the 5K distance, and then you get up to 10 miles and a half marathon. Ran my first half marathon in, I think it was 2011, Little Rock Marathon. And I was so wiped out after that, there was no way I could conceive of ever doing a full marathon. But I have done 9 full marathons now, and signed up for Marine Corps in October, and I'll probably do one before then. So I'm not as awesome as Angie is. Like, she's done 30. I've done 9.
That's
okay.
That's both pretty awesome. And Trevor, the funny thing is, talking about your first marathon, when you guys listen to Meb speak this weekend in Boston, he'll likely tell a story about his first marathon, the New York City Marathon back, I want to say in 2002, and he crosses the finish line, totally hits the wall, and says, "My first and my last." And so I guess it's people in that aftermath, you feel it, but it's pretty cool to see that 9 marathons later, you're still coming back for more. So let's talk a little bit, guys, about the podcast, Marathon Training Academy podcast. When did you realize that so many people wanted to, dive into this stuff as we're going to do today and really learn about it and talk about it and share their experiences?
pretty much after we released our first episode, uh, we've got great fans, and I'm sure there's some that are listening to this webinar right now. So we have a wonderful audience, and we started hearing back from them as soon as we started putting content out there. So that was 5 years ago, and I've changed a lot. Angie's changed. We tried to really focus on, getting helpful advice and content to people through the podcast, and also just being ourselves, being real, and keeping it entertaining. But we've definitely added a lot since then. Our fueling philosophy has totally changed, which is one reason why we're on this webinar with you tonight.
No question.
So that's interesting too.
And I want to talk about that. So when Angie, you being the one that first ran the marathons, when you were moving up from the 5K in distance and really starting to focus on nutrition, what were you reading? What were you perceiving that your body needed to be able to push and go those longer distances?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was reading pretty much the typical stuff out of Runner's World, focused primarily on more of the simple sugar model. But to be honest, for my first 3 marathons, I had no idea what I was doing with fueling. I pretty much just used whatever was cheap for my long runs, and during the marathons, I would just use whatever was at the aid station. I would hit the wall and then have like a blood sugar rush, and it was a mess. I remember my 3rd marathon, I took a gel from an aid station, and it was the grossest flavor ever. I was like gagging it down, like, why am I doing this? I thought if I continue to do marathons, I have to, get my act together here, because I was just experiencing low blood sugar and then high blood sugar, stomach upset. It was, a complete disaster, basically.
So, that's interesting, kind of that evolution. And when you talked about, low blood sugar, high blood sugar, that these are terms that are going to be so fundamental to what we discussed today, and also as we dive into UCAN. But I'm curious. You guys talk to a whole bunch of runners. I think you even coach runners as well, right, Angie? You're a coach as well.
That's correct.
So, what do you think the understanding is out there from runners of just the impact of blood sugar, what it even means? It rolls off the tip of your tongue, but do you think the average person who's training for a marathon understands the importance of it?
I think a lot has changed as I look back 5 years from when I first started working with people. I think kind of the model of calories in, calories out is pretty much kind of fading into the past as better science and better information gets put out there. And I think people are realizing that there is a different way than maybe just the sports drinks and gels that they've been using in the past. And it seems pretty typical that maybe for their first couple of marathons, people go the more traditional fuel method, and they possibly don't have a very good experience. So they think, there's got to be a better way. They start doing their research. And I actually heard about UCAN from a coaching client of mine. She was following more of a lower carbohydrate diet and talking about how this was really gentle on her stomach and providing really good, steady energy. And I thought, that sounds exactly like what I need. So I started experimenting with myself, and I actually used it for the very first time during a marathon, which is not something I recommend. You're supposed to not do anything new on race day. But it was more of a laid-back marathon. I really didn't care about my finish time. And so I just, kind of bit the bullet and used UCAN for the first time, with pretty low expectations, honestly. And it was amazing. I didn't have any of the low blood sugar. I didn't have any of the stomach upset. I had good, steady energy, and I was hooked at that point.
So that's really cool, and you are a brave person for trying it for the first time on race day. But taking a step back for a minute, so the impetus for you to try something new, like you were talking about, was the stomach issues, and kind of when you say low blood sugar, high blood sugar, another way to say it is those energy swings, right? It's just not having that consistent and even energy. But how much did you kind of know about the science behind it, and had you at that point bought into this idea that you didn't need a lot of carbs and sugars throughout a long distance running to kind of maintain your energy, or were you still battling that in your mind?
I had basically started to experiment just with different types of fueling, things like not eating at least 3 hours before my marathon or long run, so that my body wasn't busy digesting food and having those blood sugar highs and lows. So I'd already kind of started working out some of these issues. I'm a registered nurse, and so a lot of the, science and medical terminology, made sense to me. It, maybe came a little bit easier than for some people who are thinking, what is hypoglycemia? What is hyperglycemia? What are some of these concepts and everything? But we started changing our diet up, cutting out processed sugars and grains. And so just kind of as a result of that, I thought, it makes sense to change up what we're doing with our fueling as well to reflect the changes we're making in our daily lifestyle.
Cool. And I'm going to jump back to you in a moment. But Trevor, I want to kick it to you for a second. We heard about Angie's, I guess, her UCAN moment. What was yours? When did you finally decide to give it a try, and what was the experience?
I remember my first couple half marathons. I would get up about 2 hours before the race and have a bagel with jelly on it and a banana.
And we laugh,
And
you
then some
guys,
coffee.
we smile, right? But the funny thing is that's kind of the typical runner meal, if you think about it, at least coming up, what people have perceived for many years now that they should have. So go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I actually I made a post a few years ago about everything that it takes for me to run 20 miles to get through a 20 miler. I'll post it in the chat, Varen, and you could post the link for everybody if you
Cool.
think it's appropriate. Um, there you go. But yeah, uh, I've always just learned from Angie. Like I'm just too lazy to go and
He just does what I tell him mostly.
yeah. People know this that listen to our podcast, and I'm kind of her guinea pig on some stuff too. But yeah, I've done all the stuff, and my first experience with UCAN, I think it was in December of 2013, and I was sick that day, so I didn't have a good experience taking it while I run. Now I've since done like 2 sub 4 hour marathons, which is fast for me,
Absolutely.
using UCAN, and uh, it's worked great. I take all mine before I go. I try to get 2 or 3 servings down, and we'll probably talk about this,
Yep.
later on. But yeah, I mean, I have to carry like less than half of the stuff that I usually would carry on for a half marathon or a full marathon.
That's awesome. So I definitely want to get in, both of you guys. The cool thing is you've both been using it for a while now. So I want to both talk about kind of some long-term impact of it that you may or may not have noticed, as well as kind of your specific marathon protocols. And that's cool to know that you front load with it like that, Trevor, because I know we always get a bunch of questions on whether or not you can do that and kind of people's experiences with that. Angie, I wanted to ask you, with the athletes you coach, what are kind of the common nutrition challenges that people have when it comes to long distance fueling? What are your athletes generally saying, help me with?
Well, I would say a lot of people come and they really don't know what they should be doing. There's so many products out there. There's so much information. A lot of it's conflicting information, and they kind of say, "Help! I've tried this and that, and I don't really know where to go from here." So often we start at that place. Some people are coming in from a standpoint of, I just struggle with nausea in the later miles of a long run or a marathon, and I need to get that figured out. The simple sugars are really rough on my stomach. I have GI distress on race day, perhaps. I, don't know when to fuel. I, will get low blood sugar. I'll hit the wall, or I'll take too much fuel. My stomach gets upset. And then there's the whole aspect of people who train for a marathon and end up gaining weight, which can be really distressing when you're exercising that much.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I think coming, first being at Expos talking to runners, 4 or 5 years ago, really shocked me was how many people kind of will mention that I gained 4 or 5 pounds during my marathon training. And for a lot of people, if they're running their first marathon, it seems so counterintuitive, right? Because it's like this is probably, in many cases, the most that they've trained over a consistent period of time. And so yeah, I think a lot of it, of course, can point back to nutrition. So I do want to take a bit of a dive into just a few minutes into the science behind UCAN for anybody that may not be familiar with the product. But we do actually, before I do that, we have a lot of people asking specifically how you guys use the product. So Trevor, let's start with you. For a half marathon or a marathon, how will you generally take UCAN?
I'm to the point now, since I'm fat adapted, which is what we talk about quite a bit over at MTA. I could do a half marathon, or anywhere from 10 miles to half marathon without fuel. Although it sure goes better if I take a scoop or two of UCAN. For a full marathon, and I can't do them as well as Angie can. I'm kind of a big baby sometimes when it comes to my long training runs, but I like to take between 2 and 3 servings, and I like the orange flavor. And then I'll drink coffee, just because I'm a coffee addict. I'll try to have, for all you runners out there, so I'm assuming everybody's a runner who's listening to this. So if I talk about a bowel movement, then you guys understand.
Yeah,
that's somewhat right.
that's commonplace. I get emails.
I've got to take care of business before. Yeah. I got to take care of business before I go out. Coffee helps with that. Other than that, I run on an empty stomach, just UCAN. And I have taken like half of an energy bar, more as a reward for myself after I reach mile 20. Now that you guys have the UCAN bar, which rocks, by the way,
I love that.
I'm gonna be carrying that to take, and sort of as a reward. I might need it, might not, but I always like to eat something solid when I get to around mile 18 or 20 in a marathon.
How about you, Angie? What do you like to do?
That's how I do it.
I also run on an empty stomach, so if it's a morning race, I'll just, get up, get up and not eat anything. I'll have 2 scoops of UCAN about 30 to 45 minutes before the race and drink that down, and then I carry 2 servings of UCAN, and I mix it up a little bit more concentrated. I put it in an 8-ounce little bottle that used to come from a fueling pack that I had. And so I just have my 2 scoops and 8 ounces, and then I take about 2 ounces every 5 miles. So at mile 5, 10, 15, and 20. So I'm getting about half a serving at each of those points. I like to be a little bit preemptive with my fueling, especially if I'm pushing harder. And it just, it's awesome. It works great. And I just drink water from the aid stations, and that's all I use.
And to give people, who it's just an idea of what we're talking about in terms of the caloric intake here. You're talking 2 scoops prior to the marathon. That's 160 calories. You're using the ones without the protein prior to the marathon, or?
Yeah, well, I like using 1 scoop of the vanilla with protein mixed with 1 scoop of the orange. So.
Gotcha. So maybe closer to 200 calories, and then during, are you using 2 scoops of the orange? That's what you.
Sometimes I'll do 2 scoops of the orange. Sometimes I'll do 1 of the vanilla and 1 of the orange. Just kind of whatever I'm feeling like that day.
Sure. So even on a high end, I think we're talking 200 calories before, another 200 calories over the course of the marathon. Really, if you look at traditional fueling recommendations, that's unthinkable. And you're finishing these races, somewhere between 3.5 and 4 hours, or am I cheating? Are you even faster than that?
No, my fastest marathon is 3:35, and I usually finish sub 4, but I have
finishing at a good
ones.
clip too. It's not like you're finishing at a good clip. And did that amaze you the first time that you kind of did that?
Yeah, I was astounded. I was using half the amount of calories that I normally did, and I was having better energy levels, and so that that really blew me away, and was a huge selling point in it.
So I want to take a moment to just, I know that some of the people who aren't familiar with the science behind UCAN, I think it'll be helpful just to take a few minutes, because the thing I want to stress is that this isn't magic here, what's happening, and there's kind of a fundamental difference with the way UCAN works and with the way UCAN delivers energy. So the whole uniqueness and backstory to UCAN is really originated with this child, Jonah, who you're seeing on the screen. And Trevor and Angie, you guys can see the slides up on my screen?
Yep, we can.
Okay, yes. Fantastic. So This is really where UCAN started. And Jonah's the son of one of our founders, and he has a very rare blood sugar disease. He basically has a condition that causes life-threatening hypoglycemia, which Angie alluded to earlier, which is low blood sugar. So previously, Jonah was having to be fed every 2 hours, day and night. This included 3 to 4 nighttime feedings, just to maintain his energy levels, or otherwise getting very hypoglycemic. Could really result in seizures, a lot of other things, and it was a catch-22, which I didn't mention before, is that his whole issue was that if he consumed regular carbohydrates like your rices, starches, other things, his body was unable to break it down and convert it into glucose to give him energy. So he couldn't consume typical carbs, and really the only thing his parents found, and kids with this condition were able to really have, was actually just regular cornstarch. They would be fed cornstarch every 2 hours around the clock, and that would kind of break down slowly enough where it could pass through their liver, and kind of maintain that somewhat steady level of blood sugar. But it was only happening for 2 hours at a time. So Jonah's parents, they were feeding him cornstarch every 2 hours, just to basically keep him alive. And his family, they were very proactive. They started a foundation to research all different types of carbohydrates. And this is really where SUPERSTARCH, which is the key ingredient in UCAN, this is really what SUPERSTARCH was originally created for. So from 2000 to 2008, the top carbohydrate researchers at the University of Scotland, they were looking at rices, tapiocas, barleys, wheats, for the sole purpose of what would help maintain steady blood sugar in these kids for the longest. So that was their only goal. They wanted to see what carbohydrate source can we find that's going to give these kids steady energy for the longest period of time. So, like I mentioned, they tried everything, and eventually what they found was that starting with that same cornstarch, non-GMO cornstarch that these kids were taking, they apply a very specific cooking process to it. Just cook it with heat and water, but it's over a period of 40 hours. And this is a super dumbed down analogy, but when you cook rice, when you cook pasta, when you cook a carbohydrate, you can change its texture, its consistency. You can alter the properties of it. So, you do this to some degree, maybe in your own kitchen. Trevor and Angie, maybe you guys aren't doing so much of the rice and pasta anymore these days, but
Not so much.
this is essentially what they're doing to the starch, over a long period of time. And really what it did was slow the breakdown of the starch, and basically allow the superstarch to maintain steady blood sugar, or steady energy, for a really long period of time. So this was all wonderful for Jonah. He's now taking 75 grams. He's 13. He's taking 75 grams of our carbohydrate prior to sleeping at night, and it keeps his blood sugar and energy steady for 8 hours. But around 2008, when this was all happening, some of the founders of UCAN were wondering, what would happen if we gave this to elite athletes, or regular folks, like a lot of us here, on the webinar. What impact would it have on either athletic performance, or fitness, or our energy levels? So they started contacting a whole bunch of sports nutritionists, scientists, athletes, and really kind of presenting this and saying, we have this carbohydrate. What do you think? One of the guys that I think Trevor and Angie, you guys might have had him on your show in the past, a gentleman by the name of Bob Siebehar, who is the Olympic dietitian for the triathlon team in Beijing in 2008. He was kind of the guy that really strongly said, this superstarch, if it does what you tell me it's doing, it's going to completely change the way I feel my athletes, and it's really going to change sports nutrition, because what we're really trying to achieve with all of our athletes is to maintain steady blood sugar. And right now, with the products out there, which are more sugar-based, really the best way to do that is to have them dose, at very frequent intervals. But, like Angie was talking about, this can really upset people's stomach. This can also, if you kind of don't time the dosing exactly correctly, or maintain it continuously, your energy levels can really fluctuate. In the meantime, we'd also been in contact with Meb's nutritionist. She didn't tell us at the time, Meb Keflezighi, who just won the Boston Marathon last year, set to run it again in a few days. His nutritionist said, I'm working with an athlete. He's getting older. Meb was 35 at the time, or 34, I should say. And, he's struggling with the gels and the simple sugars during his run. So if you have something he could take prior to exercise that would just keep him nice and even throughout his workout, keep his energy steady, that could be exactly what he's looking for. So with all this in the background, we wanted to do a clinical trial testing our carb against maltodextrin, and maltodextrin is, it's a more complex carb than your simple sugars. Is definitely an innovation when it started appearing in a lot of sports nutrition products in the 90s. As a step up, a longer lasting source of energy than your Gatorades and your Powerades with your simple sugars. And maltodextrin is what you'll find in virtually all of your popular endurance sports nutrition products, your Goos, Cliffs, Power Bar, Hammers. And so what we really wanted to do is we wanted to test our carb against what basically everybody else was using and see, is there really difference, or is there really any different, or that was going to determine whether or not it was worth it to go into sports nutrition. So this graph was really significant. We looked at a 25-gram serving of both carbohydrates. So with maltodextrin, you see the blue line, and 25 grams is about roughly what you'll find in a typical gel. It's also what you'll roughly find in a packet of UCAN. With 25 grams of maltodextrin, you do see that big sugar spike and that drop about 30 to 40 minutes in, and that kind of tips you off. Why do they tell you to take a gel every 30 to 40 minutes? It's because it coincides with when you have that big crash, that big blood sugar crash. The really cool thing about UCAN and the SUPERSTARCH is that, you don't get that spike. But as you can see, even 2 hours later on the x-axis, your blood sugar is still right around where it started from. So it's really what that means is, with the same 25 grams of the SUPERSTARCH, you're able to maintain that pretty steady level of blood sugar or steady level of energy for, a good 90 minutes to 2 hours. Trevor and Angie, I'll let either one of you take this. You guys have, you guys have tried the gels. You guys have tried a packet of UCAN. Can you compare roughly maybe how many, for that 2 hour period of time, what the difference kind of is and what a packet of UCAN lasts you versus what, you were doing in the past?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. I know I would probably in the first 2 hours of a marathon using, maybe the multidextrin type formula, I would probably have to take at least 3 gels just to stay on top of, my energy levels. And like I talked about before, then by mile 16, I'm feeling sick to my stomach, and my gastrointestinal system is starting to rebel. And with the UCAN, you can use a way less amount and have steadier energy and not have to worry about upsetting your stomach with too much sugar, and not having to worry about like that spike that you see on the graph there, and then the subsequent dip. It really is noticeable, and it's so important when you want to keep a steady effort level when you're running. You don't want to have to think about, your stomach going haywire or your blood sugar going haywire.
The second thing I want to just one more staying with the science on it is the second graph we're going to look at, but this is going to perhaps share really what I find to be one of the most, and a lot of people, one of the most beneficial and fascinating things about UCAN is its impact on allowing you to burn more fat for fuel during exercise. But Angie or Trevor, how many of folks that you speak to, who are training for a marathon, running a marathon, would you say have some type of body composition goal?
95% maybe.
Yeah.
It's pretty high.
I think that's interesting. I mean, this is don't have concrete stats behind this, but I would venture to say that, say maybe a decade ago, if you looked at the demographic of people running marathons, it was probably that number might have been less, or maybe a body composition goal is general, but maybe a specific weight loss goal. I think more and more people, as marathons are just exploding in popularity, really are viewing training for a race as a tool to get more fit.
Oh yeah, definitely. We work with runners. We have the academy, and a lot of our members have posted some amazing before and after pictures where they've taken off, anywhere from 30 to 60 pounds. So yeah, people get into running to lose weight, and a lot of people can do that successfully. I mean, it's not, and like Angie said, sometimes you can actually gain weight while you train for a marathon because you're hungry all the time, and you think, well, I'm putting in all this hard work and exercise, it won't hurt me to go eat a quart of ice cream now or something like that. So you're eating more sugar and you're just eating more food than you normally would, and that can kind of be a trap.
That's Trevor. Actually, I want to go back to this for a second because what you just said really reminded me of something. It's beyond that fluctuation in energy. Such a big impact of this, this spike and crash, this yo-yo in your blood sugar is really its impact on sugar cravings and carb cravings. And kind of people have different words for it, whether it's hangry or I've heard the runners call it rungry. And so but that ravenous feeling of hunger after a hard workout, you're going to be so much more prone to it when you're putting your body through those constant ups and downs in your
Yeah.
blood sugar. But taking a look at this second graph, this was the impact of the superstarch on the hormone insulin. So insulin is a hormone that your body, your pancreas produces anytime you have a sugar spike. So if you look at the previous graph, that blue line, that sugar spike is going to coincide with the blue line on the insulin graph. So the role of insulin is to help you, get rid of that excess sugar in your bloodstream when you have that sugar spike. But what it does is it's going to store it away and store it away as fat. So when insulin is high, elevated in your body, you're not going to be able to burn fat to your full potential. So a lot of times what will happen, during exercise is when you're constantly consuming those fast acting sugars and you're causing this, increase in insulin throughout the workout, you're simply going to be storing, a lot of fat away that you could potentially be burning. What we find that's so unique with UCAN is because it doesn't cause that sugar spike, there's no need for your body to produce insulin. So we're allowing you to freely burn fat throughout exercise while you still get a steady release of carbohydrate. And in terms of, that's sciencey and technical maybe for some folks, but really the impact in terms of how you feel is what is so powerful about it. It's just that um, really, you're basically getting and utilizing two fuels. So it's really, you're really going to feel steady and strong and really even throughout the duration of the run. And, Trevor and Angie, kicking it back to you, what impact, as you guys have used UCAN now for, I guess, what is it? Has it been close to 2 years or a year and a half?
Yeah.
What impact have you guys seen on your body composition? And I will give you with the caveat that I know you guys have been changing your diet around too. So it's certainly UCAN is supporting a lot of other things you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I struggled with a lot of sugar cravings prior to changing my diet and prior to using UCAN, and I can definitely look back and see the huge difference now. Using UCAN during a run, I'm hungry afterward, but it's not like I am just starving and eating everything in the house. I'm not craving sugar constantly. And so, and a lot of times I'll use the UCAN with protein post run, and it's just really a perfect recovery drink and helps keep your energy levels stable and preventing you from just, you know, going to a buffet and cleaning it out kind of mentality.
We were going toward like more of a paleo, or some people call it, like Vinny Tortorich calls it, NSNG type of way of eating. So we cut out, or we severely cut down on eating sugars and grains right at about the same time as UCAN, that UCAN came along in our lives. So the two went together perfectly as far as our nutrition. And when Angie says that she used to be addicted to sugar, um, it's funny, but she can eat sugar like it's no one's business. I mean, you know how like kids, they like never have a limit how much sugar they can eat.
Yeah.
And when you start to get older, like pretty soon it makes your mouth hurt, or you just have these, sugar doesn't appeal to you as much. Well, she never reached that point in her life. She can slam it. But now it's interesting. Once you cut out sugar, like refined sugar and stuff, um, fruit tastes sweeter. So that's like a treat. We'll
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
fresh cut strawberries for dessert. I mean, that's the bomb. Or just a piece of like 86% dark chocolate. That we'll have like two of those a day, and it satiates us pretty well.
So we get this question, very frequently, which is, do you have to eat a certain way for UCAN to work or have an impact? Like, do you have to, do the no sugars, no grain? Do you have to eat lower carb? And I'll answer that question in a moment. But what I'm curious to hear from you guys is, as you've gone, more into the diet and cut out the sugars and grains, and as you've been using UCAN longer, have you found that it's lasted longer?
Yes, definitely. I think since we became fat adapted, whereas our body is more accustomed to burning fat as fuel. Um, I can do a 10-mile run without any fuel. I can do a half marathon at a moderate effort and not need any fuel. Now, if I'm going to really race it, then I want the UCAN beforehand so that I'm not going to worry about reaching the end of my glycogen stores. But yeah, definitely, it makes a big difference. And I really think with the UCAN that it's something that it's a great fuel, but then if you're trying to eat a lower carb diet, it doesn't kind of throw you back into the sugar cravings.
Right.
For me, I can have the UCAN, and it's not like it's going to make me want to eat Ben and Jerry's the rest of the day or something. And, it's satisfying, and it's obviously taking care of my body's needs, and so that's been really helpful for me. And I think that's one of the appeals to many people who are trying to cut out processed sugars or even cutting back on grains, that it really fits well with their diet and their lifestyle. And it also works great for people who are still following a more traditional diet as well.
Yeah, we
Definitely.
have folks in the academy who do both, and Angie has some coaching clients who do well on like more higher carb diet and more of the traditional type fuel, and they run fast. But it's starting to be now where more and more people that come to us and that we hear from, um, they're either like have gluten issues or they're wanting to go more of the route that Angie and I have gone, and UCAN just is perfect fit for that.
And Trevor, what's interesting is I think there's no doubt that you can always point to examples, and there's many people that, like you said, can tolerate the higher carb method of
Hmm.
fueling, and I think that's an important point to make too. There's no saying that one way doesn't work, but I think what you see a
Yeah.
lot is eventually like you're saying, maybe Angie might not reach this limit, but at some point people as they get older they get intolerant to sugar. I mean, we saw that, kind of that was Meb's impetus to want to try UCAN. And you see that, with a lot of people that could tolerate the higher carb method of fueling, then they're in the sport for longer and it becomes a struggle. And then if you put performance aside, of course, everybody's competitive. You want to beat yourself and get your new PR. But, unless you're making, your paycheck and your livelihood is dependent on what times you're on. I think for a lot of people, just looking at it from a health perspective, like, even if you just totally put performance out the window, which approach is going to be better for your long-term health? I think the one thing that we didn't really talk about with even putting your body through these blood sugar swings and taxing yourself to your pancreas to secrete so much
Yeah.
insulin, it's just it's what puts a lot of people down the road to prediabetes and other metabolic diseases. So that's always something to keep in consideration.
I agree.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so, and Angie, one interesting point that you were talking about is, in terms of running, you could do a moderate pace half marathon on no fuel, but then, if you wanted to race it, you said, or up the intensity, then you'll take UCAN, and that's interesting too. I think that's an important topic to talk about for a second, because I think what UCAN does in that situation versus say working out fasted is, because it's giving you that steady release of carbohydrate when you're pushing the intensity, versus working fasted, you're not as reliant on dipping into your stored glycogen. So UCAN really allows you to spare that stored glycogen compared to say working out fasted, and that's what's going to help you push the intensity. So that's a big thing. And then another thing that we hear a lot of people say is just how much better their brain feels, because unless you're in ketosis and you have ketones fueling your brain, most people who are eating lower carb, in a lot of cases still may need some glucose just to fuel their brain. So that's again where we see people say, when we work out with UCAN instead of working out fasted, we just feel more locked in and have more of that drive, which is such, I guess, a fundamental component of running.
definitely keeping that positive mental space is so important. And there is a physiological aspect to it too. Like you said, the brain needs glycogen, and if it feels like it's getting low, it's going to signal your body to, let's shut this party down kind of thing.
That's why after mile 20, you see all these brain dead looking runners
Right, exactly. That's why,
in
and
there.
that's probably why they've got even deep in triathlons and stuff. That's they've got the Coke and some other things like that to rev people back up. Um,
Yeah.
but everyone, we do see all your questions, and we're gonna do Q&A here in just about 5 minutes. Just want to quickly talk through the different versions of UCAN for people that may or may not know about them, have used them before, and Angie and Trevor want to understand how you guys like to use them too. So the first picture you see, what we've called on this graphic UCAN Energize, is essentially our drink mix with SUPERSTARCH that comes in 4 fruit flavors. So this is just the SUPERSTARCH plus added electrolytes. This is really what we're recommending you have as a pre-exercise snack. The thing about UCAN is you're not sipping on it slowly throughout your workout. You're kind of taking in some amount at intervals. And if you prefer to take in kind of less at a time, half a serving like Angie was talking about, you may do it every 5 miles during a marathon. If you prefer to do what Trevor does and front load a lot with it, then you may not need anything for up to mile 18 or 20. But the important thing, I'd say the best time, if you're going to choose one time to use UCAN, is prior to a workout as a pre-workout snack. And that's about 30 to 45 minutes before a workout. Can mix it as thick or as thin as you'd like. And that's really what's going to give you that nice steady and even energy. The packets, we generally say they're about 120 calories, and they'll give you about 90 minutes to 2 hours of that steady and even energy. What you see here, which is termed as UCAN Recover, is basically our SUPERSTARCH drink with added protein and electrolytes as well. But this is kind of misleading. I should probably change this because, Angie alluded to it, talking about taking the vanilla cream protein UCAN actually in her mix prior to a run and during a run. This really doesn't have to be used just for recovery. This can really, you can have it because it has the SUPERSTARCH in it. We kind of tell people, if you're a little hungry, have this as your pre-workout snack, because protein is designed to curb hunger in the stomach. That even goes for during a run. If you want to, for some people, protein might, bother your stomach a little bit if you have it during a run. So just practice it in your training. But we'll have a lot of people using the protein UCAN during or before a workout. Trevor and Angie, what do you guys like to do with the UCAN with protein compared to the SUPERSTARCH without protein?
Well, I really like using it during my workouts as well, and as a workout snack. So, I find that sometimes, people who use the protein during their workout, there's kind of a muscle sparing effect when you take protein in, like during a long run and everything, because the body tends to break down a little bit of muscle tissue for long effort endurance activities. And so I kind of just like the protein because I feel like it's buffering that a little bit. It has a little bit more calories to it. And honestly, I really like the flavor of the vanilla, so it's kind of a nice package for me.
No question. Trevor, how do you like to differentiate between the two?
Well, I got to tell you, really haven't experimented with the vanilla or the protein packet. So I'm sort of like a one-trick pony. I
So
take the orange UCAN before my runs, my long runs or my races, and that's
cool.
about it.
Cool.
I have been experimenting with the snack bar, and I use that during a couple long runs, just because sometimes when you're running long, you feel like something more solid, and so I would just break the bar in half and have maybe for like a 20-mile run, I'll have my pre UCAN, just one scoop, and then at mile 9 and maybe mile 16, I would have half of the bar, and that was a nice alternative to carrying, the liquid in my handheld bottle. So that is an option that people may want to experiment with as well.
Absolutely, and so we always have a lot of questions. That's a great to hear that you tried taking it during the run and it worked out. So the UCAN snack bar, which I don't know if people can still see me on the webcam. I'm holding it up. You also see it on the screen over there. This is our newest product, and so the UCAN snack bar also has the super starch in it. Now it has less of it, about 10 grams of super starch per bar, compared to about 25 per packet. So you are getting a little bit less of it. So if you're looking, for kind of that pre long run fuel, the powder still may be your best bet. But for a lot of people, where the bar fits in is like Angie was talking about, something to nibble on during a workout. It's really easy on the stomach. Really got a nice texture to it, and really palatable during a run. And for a lot of people, it's really that breakfast that supports the same principles that UCAN and the other UCAN products, that steady blood sugar, steady energy principle of UCAN. So instead of having a bar for breakfast before your marathon that might be higher in sugar, having the UCAN snack bar, this is going to really keep you satiated. It's about 190 calories, 6 grams of protein, 10 grams of fat. So it's really got what you need from a breakfast bar to keep you nice and full. And then before shorter workouts, so many times if you're running after work in the evening and you may just be running 45 minutes to an hour, a lot of times I know in those situations people say they might still use the UCAN powder, and you just use a little bit less of it, a scoop if you have the tub instead of a full packet. But the bar is a really nice alternative, especially for a lot of people around that time after work, if you haven't eaten in say 5 or 6 hours and you want something more substantial than just the powder. The bar works well there too. And then the final UCAN product to talk about is actually our only UCAN product without the superstarch, which is the UCAN hydrate. And this is simply an electrolyte replacement. No sugar, no calories, so it's not going to give you any energy. It's just got 5 electrolytes: sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, 2 forms of sodium. And so that's just going to replenish what you lose when you sweat. And that can be sipped on, in a bottle during a run, or also something that you can have afterwards. But let's get to these questions, guys. I know the question line is lighting up, so let's see what we got here. Mark says, I do CrossFit 3 days a week and run 3 days a week. What are the advantages? What are the advantages of UCAN versus Progenics for CrossFit, or Hammer Recoverite for running? So, Mark, I'll kind of just take this more generally speaking. Really the UCAN protein, the way it's different than say something with a carb protein drink that might have sugars or maltodextrin in it, is that steady energy that we've been talking about. So pairing the superstarch with protein is going to give you the benefits of protein. It's going to also keep your energy nice and even. And I'm not entirely sure which the Progenics, whether or not it has carbs, but the other end of the spectrum is, you got a lot of great protein powders that don't have carbs. They've taken the sugars out, and they're just giving you protein, which is great. And it's it can be mixed with UCAN. It's a good fit in other situations to have on its own. But in terms of prior to a workout, protein on its own isn't exactly it's just not going to give you a good source of energy. So that's again where having the UCAN with protein would benefit you. Simply, it's providing you with energy. Let's see. Jenny says, is UCAN the only thing you guys eat, drink before the race starts? And then she also asks, when do you take the protein versus the regular? Are they interchangeable? So I think you talked about that. But Angie, I don't remember, or Trevor, if you guys talked about this before. What is breakfast for you guys on race day?
For a traditional marathon start, say anywhere from 6 to maybe 9 in the morning, just the only thing I will have is my 2 servings of UCAN about 30 to 45 minutes before the race, and I'm good to go. Trevor has to have his coffee along with that. But other than that, we don't eat anything because I really feel like keeping that 3-hour window without having any other source of especially carbohydrates other than the UCAN is really helpful to keep your blood sugar stable. Now for the Boston Marathon, I'll be running that on Monday, and my starting time won't be till approximately 10:50 in the morning. So this is going to be a little bit different than what I'm used to. And so I'm planning on having a UCAN bar that morning, probably about maybe 2.5 hours before my start time, and then 45 minutes before the start time, I'll just jump into my 2 servings of UCAN and go from there.
Very cool. Always good to know your guys' trade secrets coming from 39, soon to be 41 total marathons. Let's
31.
see. 31. You're right. You got me. You're
Yeah,
right.
we have 3 UCAN bars left, and I ate one today, so now we have 2. And she's like, "Don't eat him. I have to take him to Boston."
Let's see. Timothy, who will be joining us all in Boston, says, "Have you ever experienced reactions between certain food and the pre-race UCAN? Attempting to game plan my meal for Boston Marathon morning with the early wake up and long wait time. Anything that hasn't worked well for you guys?"
I typically, have trouble with digestion if I eat anything too close to the race. I haven't had any issues with the UCAN as far as upset stomach, GI distress, like the diarrhea that can be common on race morning if something doesn't agree with you. But I'm pretty careful not to eat anything else within that 3-hour window. So if it were me, I would definitely make sure that my breakfast, whatever I chose, was completed at least 3 hours before the race start time, and then go into your UCAN fueling strategy, before the race and everything. Just giving the window for your body to thoroughly digest the food, have time to visit the porta pots a few times, and make sure you're, feeling good and cleaned out.
Melissa says that she ran her first marathon this past January with UCAN with great success. Congratulations, Melissa. Love to hear that. I was able to have someone on course at 2 different points hand me her UCAN, and so she's running the Marine Corps Marathon this October and looking for ideas on what to do to get those doses because she's not confident on people handing it to her. Angie, you mentioned it before, but if you could just talk about again what you use to carry UCAN with you.
Yes, I'm a big fan of the multi-dose bottle, and maybe Trevor will go over and get it if he can see it here. But I just have this little, like a hard plastic 8-ounce fueling bottle, and then I will pre-mix with my shaker bottle with a little wire ball in there, 8 ounces of water, 2 scoops of UCAN, and I have my little bottle, and I just take, the prearranged. I don't know if people can see this here. It's nothing fancy. It just kind of fits in my grip really nicely. It's small and um, portable, and then I just take, about 2 ounces every few miles, which gives me approximately half a scoop of UCAN at each time, and it works great. There are different little pouches you can buy, anywhere from 6 to 10 ounces that I've seen people use, and I really find that concentrating it down with less water just helps that you have less to carry, if you're going to have to be, transporting it the whole time. And plus, sometimes taking it with less water, I find that people are able to digest it better for some reason. It's just less fluid rattling around in their stomach.
That's exactly, great point, Angie. And I think this is another question. I'm sure someone's going to ask this as I scroll through the questions, but you just nailed it. The amount of water you use with UCAN has no impact on digestion or how the product works. So it's simply a matter of personal preference. And like Angie was saying, I would almost tell you you're better off if the consistency is going to be a little bit thicker, so a little bit chalkier. So if you're able to kind of handle it thicker, in some ways you're better off taking it thicker because you just have less water in your belly. And I always encourage folks, to think about their UCAN intake separate from their hydration. Like, yes, UCAN is in the process giving you some hydration, but you're better off, really looking at UCAN as your fuel and then hydrating separately as needed, with water or additional electrolytes if you need it.
Hey,
Let's.
I was gonna say too, Varn, is this little bottle? It came with a fueling belt. I think it's called an Amplifod 4, and people can Google it. But
Cool.
there's tons of good, fueling belts and systems like that. And when I was a new runner and I first thought about having to carry a bottle like the whole time, I thought, who wants to do that? But really, once you start, and trail running kind of helps you this because you're trail running, you're out there in the woods, and there's nobody to come bring you stuff, if you're running somewhere like that, and it becomes just like part of your hand. You don't even think about it. So Angie carries a bottle with her, and I sometimes do too, because we don't like to mess around with sometimes like stopping at fueling stations or the little cups they give you. So yeah, you can get used to carrying something like that with UCAN pre-mixed in it, and not have to rely on someone to bring it to you. I'm just trying to answer that last question there.
No
kind of
question. And
thing.
isn't it, it's funny, right, that people are often, you can be so meticulous about so many aspects of your race, but then you're going to leave your fuel or your nutrition up to what they're serving on the course, or whether, a bunch of other runners feel like stopping there when you do and you can't get to it. It's kind of funny to think about it in that context. And, in terms of carrying, Trevor, I know, like, in talking to Greg McMillan, the running coach, that he's a big proponent of that idea as well. Just because you're fueling when you want to with what you want to fuel with. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think with the UCAN gel, I mean, we've seen people get. I think the bottles are great, but if you're just somebody that's absolutely not going to carry it, we've had people carry it in like Ziploc baggies and stick it in the pocket of their shorts. A woman last year at Marine Corps told me she, had it in a 4 ounce travel shampoo bottle in her sports bra and had it mixed up thing. So I mean, people are getting they're getting all sorts of creative with it. That's for sure.
And Marine Corps last year, I saw someone dig their fuel out of the bushes that they'd hidden there.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly right. I bet there's all sorts of
It was
things
like
going
a
on.
he had like a bag of pretzels or something that he had stashed
That's
in March
hilarious.
12th.
That's how the squirrels get into them.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I hope you guys aren't recommending the athletes and
No,
coach
no.
to do that. Let's see. Jenny says, did either of you guys use the plain UCAN? We didn't really talk too much about it.
I have used the plain. I typically will mix it. Flavor for me is not ideal for the plain. Some people can use the plain, and
Tastes
they
like cornstarch with water, right? We can be
yeah,
honest.
to me it tastes like kind of like socks. So, it's not highly appealing, but you can actually flavor it with the UCAN hydrate, and kind of that lemon lime flavor works well, or any other type of maybe an electrolyte tablet with a flavor to it. You can dissolve that first in the water, then add your scoop of plain UCAN, shake it up. So you could vary your flavor if you want it more mild than, some of the fruit flavors and stuff like that, or if you're sensitive to any of the ingredients in the fruit flavored ones and stuff.
And to that point, the plain UCAN is just the super starch, nothing else, no electrolytes, no flavors, nothing, no sweeteners. So I think what Angie said is great. The UCAN hydrate, electrolyte tab of your choice. Those are good options. What you just want to with UCAN in general, you're trying to limit the sugar intake in conjunction with UCAN, and really. I think somebody else that asked this question in the chat. I just saw it, but asking if does Gatorade impact you if you're fat adapted? Or I guess he's asking if does it impact your ability to burn fat? Well, I'll let you guys. I know you guys have talked to many experts on this and done a ton of research yourself on this. The idea of becoming fat adapted. Where do you see the interplay between consuming sugars during a marathon on that fat adaptation?
I think one of the beauty of being fat adapted is that you're way more sensitive to sugar, and so that you need less of it. You don't need to be throwing down gels every 30 minutes. Some people find that they can just kind of trickle more of a simple sugar, and it's more effective than it would have been normally. I find that just because my blood sugar tends to be more sensitive to that kind of stuff, that it's not really a good mix for me. And so I've really just stuck with the UCAN and not tried to add anything else to it. Taking Gatorade from aid stations, I pretty much stay away from it because, on race day, I want everything to go well. I don't really want it to be an experimentation time for me. And so that's just kind of the route I've taken. But I know people, who do supplement with other things. And, if it works for them, it's something to practice in your training during your long runs, kind of get that fueling strategy down and everything. But
Angie's a big proponent of sticking with the tried and true, like what you practice with on your long runs, taking that to the marathon, and not having to rely on whatever the race is going to provide as far as fuel goes.
Makes a ton of sense. If you're comfortable with it when you're practicing, you can be comfortable with it when you race. And there's so many other variables when especially a race like the Boston Marathon or some of these bigger marathons where you're battling so many other people and different things that it's having that element consistent is a good thing for sure. Trevor,
Although she has been known to take a beer stop No.
That's needed.
You're
That's
in more
needed.
laid-back marathon, yes.
There you go. You run enough of them where you got to treat something like that. Hey, you guys, I know we've hit the hour mark. If you guys don't mind, to just keep you around for about 10 more minutes. We just have a few more questions to get through, and it seems like people have a lot of interest in what you guys have to say and the insight you're bringing. So
Yeah.
we really appreciate it.
Oh, these are good questions.
Awesome. Before I give you guys a couple more questions, I just want to send out a couple offers as a thanks to everybody joining us in the audience, and these will be emailed again to you after after this is done, along with the full recording of the webinar. So you don't need to stress about this right now. But if anybody has to go, I'll put them out there. We are offering a special marathon training pack from the URL that I just put in the chat. Again, this will be emailed to you. It's basically a tub of the UCAN SUPERSTARCH without protein, a tub of the UCAN with protein, and a box of the UCAN hydration, all at a 25% discount. So you can choose your flavors and you can get your marathon training pack. And if you just want something else, you already know what you like, or you're new to UCAN, you can use the code UCANTRAIN262 at our online store. That'll give you a 20% discount. Again, that's UCANTRAIN262 for 20% off at generationyoucan.com/store. Just posted that in the chat as well. So let's see. Molly was wondering, or sorry, let me get to Paula first. She says, first of all, she says, because of Angie and Trevor, I'm a UCAN fan, so thank you guys very much. And Paula says, when I mix UCAN, it gets foamy in my bottle. What can I do to minimize foaming? You guys run into that issue before?
It does. And, if it's a warmer day, kind of warm, foamy fuel is not very appealing. I think the biggest thing that helps me is to cut down on the amount of water. That way it doesn't foam as much. So if you mix it a lot thicker, in a smaller amount of water, then you don't get really that foaming as much. And I don't know that. I noticed it at first when I was mixing it with more water, it would kind of get warm and foamy. But if you just concentrate it down, for me, it's taking care of that problem.
See, I don't have that problem because I'm a front loader, as Garen calls me.
There you go. No question.
I've been called a freeloader before.
That's
Front loader.
front
So
loaders. Front loaders better than
yeah.
I would never say that about you, Trevor.
So
But
I know, man. Since I take all mine beforehand, it doesn't get warm. I mean, I like to take it fresh out of the refrigerator, or I'll put cold water in it because I just don't like taking the warm UCAN, like if it's been in my
totally.
hand for 2 hours or something. And Angie can handle that fine,
You
but
don't mind it, yeah, and that's I always say that, yeah, I'm kind of like you with that. UCAN's not going to spoil, if you premix it, so you can premix it up to 48 hours in advance. A lot of people, like Trevor was saying, they'll refrigerate it the night before so it's nice and cold. And if you're running in the morning, sometimes an extra 3 minutes seems like an extra 2 hours if you don't have to do it in the morning.
yeah,
But then even we've had Ironman triathletes like freeze it and leave it at their transition area, and then get it
mm,
at some point several hours into the race, and it's kind of thawed. But yeah, will taste a heck of a lot better cold. But if you don't really care about taste, then it won't spoil when it's warm. I think that's a good call, Angie. With less
yeah.
water though, that's the best bet. Mitch, excuse me, wants to know, and this might be a question actually that if you could think back before you guys were really fat adapted and able to go really long without much fuel. He wants to know what long run mileage during marathon training did you start using UCAN? So maybe you can actually even answer that to back then and then now as well.
Well, I guess since I first used it for a marathon, it was kind of a weird way to jump into it and everything. But I would say pre-fat adaptation, I would have to start fueling by the 60 to 90 minute mark. So since we kind of started changing our diet and becoming fat adapted at the same time we started using UCAN, it's a little bit unique. But I find that people who are not a fat adapted typically can take the 1 to 2 servings prior to their either long run or their marathon, and then by about 90 minutes maybe take another serving, 60 to 90 minutes. And that's something to experiment with. And most people can have enough glycogen on board for about that 60 to 90-minute window without fuel. But if you're going to be running, faster or, trying to have a better effort, then it really helps just to have something on board to keep your energy stable.
Cool. Let's see. Dan says, is it important to use the added protein you can during the marathon? So you kind of talked about this one too in terms of the muscle breakdown aspect. But when did you put that in the mix? In terms of during your runs, when did you kind of figure out that you like to have that extra protein on board?
I guess maybe after a couple of marathons, I just decided, I'm gonna try the protein and see how it works. And, I think it maybe with the extra calories it made me feel a little bit better, and I like the flavor of the vanilla, and, I tolerated it well. So I think it's a matter of personal preference, really. Um, and, definitely if you're looking for a recovery fuel, then you're going to want to go with the UCAN with protein for that. But I think as far as your pre-workout and your during your run fuel, it's just a matter of preference.
And
We
Trevor,
would
I would.
definitely recommend recovery.
Mhm.
Yeah, we actually, haven't, we kind of have stayed more with the pre-run use of UCAN, but I think, speaking to the recovery aspect for a minute, one of the things that Meb's really seen as he's advanced in his career is when he's training for a marathon now, he's not putting in the mileage that he was when he used to, and in using the UCAN with protein for recovery, I think that's really allowing that fat burning process to continue. A lot of times, like people, you might run long miles and then reward yourself with something sugary, a higher carb treat, or you even may think in some cases you're doing what's right and having chocolate milk, which is touted as a great recovery drink and does have that kind of that 4-to-1 carb to protein ratio that people point at, but something with 20 grams of sugar in it, when you get that sugar spike and that insulin spike, again you're burning more sugar rather than continuing to burn fat. How have you implemented UCAN in the recovery period, and do you feel like that's had an impact again on that body composition?
I think it's been helpful since I run fasted in the morning typically. Then if I have a hard workout like a speed workout or a long run, I like to take the UCAN Recover in that 30-minute kind of window after my workout, and that gives me time that I know that the glycogen is going to go back into the muscles, and then I also am not starving to death while I make breakfast or whatever. Now for a typical shorter run, easy run during the week, I don't necessarily always use it. I'll just maybe have breakfast right afterwards, but I found it very helpful for speed workout, maybe a tough hill workout, or a long run.
Let's see, man. So many good questions. I'm trying to see which ones have not been answered. So, oh, this is a good one actually. Fabio wants to know, first of all, probably the best name out of any question that's been asked. Fabio wants to know the average runner runs a marathon between 3 to 5 hours. Can UCAN be used as sort of a carbo loader before the race? Well, I would curious first of all on your guys' take on carb loading as you've gotten more into fat adaptation, and have you ever used UCAN kind of as a way to top off your glycogen, really get your carbohydrate stores up prior to a race?
Well, I think it can be helpful to eat a slighter high, slightly more percentage of carbs in and maybe the 3 days going into a marathon. It doesn't mean that you need to be loading in bagels and rice and
Sure.
everything. I think just adding maybe an extra couple pieces of fruit to your diet, or possibly having some rice with a meal. It doesn't have to be a ton of stuff, because basically whatever the body doesn't need as far as its carbohydrates go, it's just going to be stored as fat, or it's going to be eliminated from the body. So, you know, eat a few more carbs in the days leading up to the race, and maybe have as a snack some of the days that you can, and that would be very helpful. You're keeping your calories down, but you're still getting a good source of carbohydrates. um, prior to the race, Trevor likes to front load with most of his UCAN, And, it seems to be a good strategy. It's certainly not going to be bad for your blood sugar. Um, it may not necessarily be needed, but, ultra marathoners use this fuel as well, and they're going to be going, multiple hours, super long distances, and it can be very helpful for them just to keep their carbohydrates up.
I wonder, like, if Flavio is asking, like, in the traditional sense of the pasta dinner before the marathon.
Sure.
In lieu of that, just taking UCAN. No, we haven't tried that. Haven't even thought about doing that. That's an interesting question, though. But
definitely, Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we haven't really. It's been quite a few years since we stopped doing that pasta dinner, thing. And I know it's still popular. We go to a ton of marathons that have pasta dinners, and once in a while we'll go and we'll just have the sauce and and the meat, since we don't eat pasta or a lot of grains. So we're not really big proponents at all of the carbo loading model. And we've had plenty of guests on our show, like Dr. Tim Noakes, who helped perpetuate a lot of the science in the 70s or whenever that was about carbo loading. Now he's like reversed.
Right. The
on a lot of what he said.
Made a big apology to everybody for what he was advocating.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at a lot of what the body does, during the night, your body is going to use up the glycogen stores in your liver. But by and large, it keeps all your muscle glycogen stores. So when you wake up in the morning, really all you need to do pre-race is top off the liver glycogen stores, unless you're going to be going multiple hours before your race. So, from a standpoint of, maybe your stomach feels empty, but you don't necessarily need to load a lot of food in there because your muscles have the glycogen they need to go. You just need to top off your liver stores, and you can do that easily by taking the UCAN pre-race.
I'll leave you guys with this last one. How do you determine whether or not the electrolytes that are already in UCAN are sufficient versus needing to add in additional electrolytes for hydration?
Well, I think it depends on the temperature that you're going to be running or racing in. If you're a real salty sweater, some people sweat really profusely and they end up having, kind of a salty crust on their face.
Yep.
They tend to excrete more electrolytes during a run. Some people who deal with, muscle cramping, which can sometimes be caused by a fluid or electrolyte imbalance, may need to look at using more electrolytes. And, for them, the UCAN hydrate may be a very good option. There's other types of electrolyte tablets that people take. Trevor tends to be more of a person who needs more electrolytes. I don't really struggle with cramping or anything, but I think it's something to kind of work out in your training and then determine on race day. If it's going to be above 60 degrees, you're probably going to need some extra electrolytes because you're going to be sweating more and your body is just going to be going through more of the electrolytes and you'll need to replace them.
Yeah, I always bring some along with me. I used to take a lot more, though, when I was doing more of the old school fueling. I'd be taking these tablets and popping like 4 an hour. Now, I don't need to do that, but if I feel like some fatigue coming up in my legs, then I'll take a couple, so I'll bring them along with me always as backup, but
so
won't
guys,
necessarily always need them.
We are getting close to the end of the road. This has been, no pun intended, a marathon chat, and it's been really fun catching up with you guys. So before we go, though, we are going to see you guys in Boston, which I'm really excited about coming here in a few days. And you've got a lot of cool things going on in Boston as well. What are you guys doing for anyone on here who's going to be in Boston and fans of your show? Can they?
Yeah.
How can they be groupies?
We're really excited. We're actually leaving this Friday and flying out there, and we're staying with someone who found us through the podcast and offered us a place to stay. So
that's the freeloader part.
Yeah,
Trevor.
No, we have a lot of great fans. We're going to be doing the 5K on Saturday morning. We'll be going to the expo. We'll be sure to stop by the UCAN booth, and we're going to try to make the panel discussion with Meb.
Fantastic.
And yeah, we're going to attend that. Then we have a meetup for those that are interested, they're going to be there in Boston who want to have lunch with us. It's just sort of a informal gathering of runners. That will be on Saturday at 1 o'clock in the Back Bay area at a restaurant. We have information about that on our website as well as an event created on our Facebook page. And then, of course, Angie's doing the marathon.
Awesome.
And then afterwards, we're gonna go feast.
Well, yeah, no, I grew up just about 12 miles from the finish line outside of Boston, in Lexington, Massachusetts. So you guys are going to be in good
Cool.
hands if you're looking to feast after the marathon. A lot of good places. Hopefully, sunny day, not too sunny, but some good baseball after the marathon. The Red Sox always play, so it's always a great time of year. And where can people find the podcast and what's for listeners of the podcast? What's coming up that's exciting?
Well, yeah, thanks. We're gonna do a complete recap of the Boston Marathon, and I'm actually gonna try to record a little bit while I'm there, with different people that we meet with, maybe some fans who want to give a shout out on the show or something. So we're gonna have a recap. We're also, our next episode before Boston, we're gonna have Jeff Galloway on. He's of course the creator of the Run Walk Run method and a living legend. But yeah, and of course we have episodes where we don't have guests on. It's just Angie and I talking about marathon training, and she's the running coach. She's the expert. I'm just the guy who asks dumb questions. But if people want to find us, marathontrainingacademy.com.
Post that in the chat right now. And we'll also, again, for any of you guys that do want to check out the podcast, it's a great listen. I travel a whole lot for UCAN, and you guys keep me entertained on many a flight. So I do encourage everybody who hasn't had a chance to check out the podcast to pay him a visit at marathontrainingacademy.com. Great tips like you guys had today, and also you guys have a good style, good back and forth. I enjoy listening to it. But thanks again, Angie and Trevor, from the Marathon Training Academy podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thanks for all the insight. Really valuable, and the fact that we're on for 20 extra minutes means that people had a lot of questions. And actually, I should have said this off the top, but I do apologize for having to delay this by 30 minutes, but glad everybody could still make it out tonight. So thank you guys, and really look forward to seeing you in Boston. Safe travels.
Thank you, and we'll see you there.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Sounds great. Have a good night, everybody. This is the Generation UCAN webinar with Trevor and Angie from Marathon Training Academy. Stay tuned to your email for a special offer and a recording. Have a good night.